Assalamu alaikum, hello, and welcome to the first ever episode of Silly Points Cricket. We are very excited to be here. It's been a long time coming. Just getting here has been a challenge. We've had to get equipment. We've had to get understand how software works. We've had to get the microphones, the studio room. And most importantly, I have had to get my co-host who has been doing this journey with me. My co-host for today and always will be Muhammad Taufeeq Mia. Taufeeq, how are you doing, man?
Excellent, man. It's been a journey. As you mentioned, it's been very difficult with the software and technical issues, but super excited to be here and excited to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, the reason we started this was because, we realized that, hey, there's not a cricket podcast out there, ever since Ramiz Raja has now become CEO of Chair, Ramiz Speaks, we haven't got anything there. So hopefully we're filling a void. If there is something out there that, that we have missed, then apologies. But I think this is going to be great. We love Pakistan cricket, and Pakistan cricket has always been entertaining. So if something is entertaining, you should talk about it. We're hopefully this will go on for a long time. And, if you enjoy the content, please subscribe. Please let us know if there's anything that we are doing incorrectly. But Taufeeq, let's get this ball rolling.
Excellent.
All right. So our first episode is, it's been a while, but we wanted to recap this because it was something that was very enjoyable and, as I said, entertaining. The Cricket World Cup. Taufeeq, summarize that World Cup, man. Bittersweet for me, but what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's same. Likewise, man. It was bittersweet. But let's do a quick recap. We'll start off with the Super 12 just so it's been a while. Let's just tell everybody kind of the results and then go into the details and we'll discuss it. But in the Super 12, as you know, there's 6 teams in 2 groups. Group 1 was considered the group of death with England, Australia, South Africa, Sri Lanka, West Indies, and Bangladesh. And then the second group was our dear Pakistan was in there, along with New Zealand, India, Afghanistan, Namibia, and Scotland. And in those 2 groups, you'll notice that it was a very tough format to go through because only 4 teams out of the 2 groups would come out and play the semifinals and then the finals, right? So there would be a lot of teams considered to have played decently well, but not make it to the semifinals. In Group 1, England and Australia made it through with 8 points each. Now South Africa also had 8 points, but no surprise, I should probably say, they didn't make it through, right?
No, South Africa had what, you would say South Africa type World Cup, just another way of getting knocked out. But yeah, both groups were tough. Definitely Pakistan's group was probably a slightly easier, but still for Pakistan to qualify was still a tall ask because I think, to be sure you had to beat both New Zealand and India.
Yep.
And I don't know if that was going to happen. I felt like we could beat India, but I wasn't sure if we were going to beat New Zealand. But to your point, the first group was definitely tough. I got a feel for South Africa. They beat England, right?
Yeah, they did. The only team to beat England in the group stages. Yeah.
Well, South Africa, and they still got knocked out. Right. Sorry, South African fans, but that's the, I think there's some sort of a hex on the South African team.
I absolutely agree. On Pakistan's side, I think this must be a record for Pakistan specifically, being undefeated in the group stages, winning all 5 of their games. Quite convincingly, I'd like to say as well. I think they timed their chases really well, and they did exceptionally well, especially against New Zealand and India.
Yeah, we'll get to that, what Pakistan did well. But yeah, I don't think we've ever won the group stages
that convincingly.
That convincing. I remember the 99 World Cup, we got through very comfortably. But even then, I think we lost to India in the group stages,
right? And
we lost to South Africa in the group stages, and Bangladesh too. Bangladesh in the group stages.
So you can see how forgiving that format used to be, right? Compared to this time, if you lost one game, you're basically at the mercy of net run rate, which South Africa was. Somehow India seemed like they could still get through for like the longest time. You'd see all these predictions like this has to happen, that has to happen, that has to happen. And surprisingly, Pakistan had none of that. They just had a clear road ahead, won their 2 hardest games,
right,
and continued winning. So with that, going into the semifinals, Pakistan were faced with Australia. Australia lost, and in fact, it was probably the only drop catch that we had in that tournament.
Pakistan,
was in that game against Australia. England versus New Zealand. New Zealand triumphed, and in the finals, New Zealand facing Australia. Australia won and played really good cricket. But in terms of, if I were to kind of summarize and say, okay, who are the 2 teams that underperformed and 2 teams that outperformed expectations? On the underperformance, I'd say India and Bangladesh.
Right.
Bangladesh, not because they didn't make it to the semis or anything like that, but just the way they lost in the group stages was very disheartening to see. I mean, they just played terrible cricket, and you can't really argue that, because Shakib got injured or anything like that, because one man shouldn't be solely responsible for a team's dire efforts. India, because I felt like, as I mentioned, this is underperforming against expectations. And the expectations for India would have always been that you're going to make the semis. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no. I definitely, Bangladesh did underachieve. Like, there's no doubt about that. They should have done better. They actually have a very strong team in terms of, bowling, spinners, all of that, which should have come in handy in UAE. But their batting let them down. I think they got bowled out for 76 in one match or something like that. So I'll agree with Bangladesh. But India, they did underperform. But you have to understand that we could have said that about India, Pakistan, or New Zealand, right? Because it was, you lose one game, you're out. And people had this perception that I thought was a little overestimated of how good India was.
Right.
I think we spoke about this previously. India, in my mind, this was one of their weakest teams in an ICC tournament. And they made some baffling decisions, not playing Ashwin.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. They weren't really informed. They were a little tired. They had a series right before that, they were going right in, the IPL bubble.
Right.
So they weren't coming in, in the best shape, mentality, when you have to be cool, calm, and collected. And I think, it would be harsh for me to say that they underperformed. I think they lost one game to Pakistan and lost another game to New Zealand. They weren't terrible in both games, but given their team, I just don't think that I wasn't expecting them to go far. I really wasn't. And I know this might sound like a typical Pakistani. I got my Pakistani topi on and, all the patriotism. But I just didn't expect India to go far. Their bowling was weak. Shami, Kumar, not the greatest frontline attack. They didn't play Ashwin. So they're relying on their top 3. So,
and to put it into perspective, right, you can have bad days, but you would think and you would back India to at least beat one of the 2 teams in their group stage, Pakistan and India. And if they had, they would have gone through by net run rate, in fact. So if they had just beaten Pakistan or New Zealand.
But that's my point, right? Because they didn't win one game, you can't really say they underperformed, right? If anything, I would have said West Indies underperformed given their team. They were horrible.
Yeah.
Like Chris Gale, you might as well have put my mother on the field, But going back to, India, I wouldn't have surprised if they went through. But if they had won the entire thing, I would have kudos to them. But it didn't happen. I just didn't see it.
What about outperforming expectations? I had Pakistan and Australia as outperforming expectations.
Yeah,
Pakistan is an obvious one, and we'll talk about it more. But Australia, unlike South Africa, they are really good in major tournaments. But coming into this major tournament, their form was off. They were not having a good game series against, I believe it was Bangladesh. And even before that, Warner was out of touch.
He got dropped, right, by the Sunrisers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was...
Yeah, this is the Australian mentality.
Right.
The winning mentality. We don't give a damn, we will win the tournament. Something that I admire them. They've had this in every sport ever since Australian sport has existed.
Yeah. Champions mentality.
Mentality.
That sums it up well.
Yeah, Justin Langer, credit to him, right? He really galvanized that team. So, and a lot of players played their part, right? Mitchell Marsh, Warner, Aaron Finch, Zampa had a great tournament. Stark I thought was okay, but there were other bowlers who stepped up. And they had all the elements. Steve Smith was anonymous during the tournament, right? But they just had players stand up, and in a way, Pakistan did the same thing, right? Every player in Pakistan stood up, and again, we'll get to that a little bit later. But outperformed definitely Pakistan and 100% Australia. But you know what? This is another tournament that New Zealand has made the finals or the semifinals of again and again and again. These guys, I can't remember a tournament where they've been knocked out before the semis.
Yeah. They're a very consistent team, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they do it. Like, they got, a population of, 10 million? Less than that? A little bit more? I don't know what the population is. Someone can look that up. But, compared to the other cricketing nations, not much, right? And it's crazy. It's just crazy. Great leadership, great players. And I think their press doesn't go as if they lose a game, it's not the end of the world. Whereas in Pakistan,
or India
or Australia, they lose a game, the scrutiny is on, right? Yeah. Even England, right? Yeah. So New Zealand, they're a little bit, I think they treat their players a little bit better than other countries. But yeah, hats off to them. I would say they overachieve too. They overachieve in every tournament. They're never the favorites. Yeah, never ever the favorites, right? And kudos to them. They lost another tournament, but another final rather. So maybe they need to fix that. But kudos to them.
So what about, you talked about India maybe not necessarily underperforming expectations. I want to talk about something in this tournament, the toss. How big of a factor was it? And just to put it into context, here are some stats.
Yeah.
22 out of the 33 games won by teams batting second. And this is Super 12.
22 out of 33. So 67%. Okay.
Yeah, about 67%. And that's kind of coin flip in the end, right? In the grand scheme of things, with only 33 chances. But 8 out of 9 games won by teams batting second, if only watching the top 6 play each other. So the top 3 in Group 1 and top 3 in Group 2. Mm-hmm. And that is a stark difference in statistics. Now, here's a little bit more color. Pakistan were not expected to be undefeated, and they really had 2 hard games, right? New Zealand and India. And they were batting second in those 2 games. India, that was expected to go to the semis, a little bit of drama here.
Yeah.
They were bowling second. Under the dew factor, right? And so this whole toss thing is all about the dew factor. And could that have changed if, for example, the dew wasn't there, or if India were batting second? Could it be India in the semifinals and not Pakistan?
Look, it's hindsight's a wonderful thing, right? But I look, there's definitely a case to be made, right? But the countries knew what they were getting into beforehand, right? And this sort of, any tour you go to, there's always a pitch factor, right? You go to India, it's going to be a dust bowl by day 4, day 5, and spin's going to play a part. When you go to Australia or South Africa, you're going to see some swing. Or England, you're going to see some swing day 1, right? So bowling first is probably the best thing, unless you're Nasser Hussain and you bat first. Gotta bring that in. But so countries knew what they were getting into. They knew the dew factor, and that's just the conditions, right? Do I wish that the pitch didn't play as much of a factor? Sure, but I would wish that upon any country, right? Any country you go to, I wish the pitch was. There's a reason why home nations win their test matches or their ODI matches much more than the visiting, right? Because they're used to their conditions, right? So the conditions are the conditions. And I think, this, at some point, some team has got to say, hey, we'll master the dew, right? We'll learn how to play with the conditions in UAE. And until they do, someone will at one point, whether that's 20, 30, 40, whatever years down the line, someone will master it, and it won't be a talking point anymore. But my point is that it's there, but everyone knew, and no one should really use that as a
That's fair.
Yeah.
So you're basically summing it up and saying adjust to the conditions because
Yeah.
you know the conditions, as opposed to making that an excuse.
Right.
And going forward, I mean, we know one-day internationals and test matches, they play over a little bit of a longer period, so at least both teams feel the same type of conditions. That is kind of out of their hands. It's a luck of the draw with a coin flip, right?
Yeah.
But T20s, I mean, there's such a short format that people are honestly asking the question, should the T20s be broken into 4 innings, 10 overs each, so that both teams play it?
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Or alternatively, could they be played all in the day, but then you've got the media rights
Yeah, you got
issues
the media.
and
No,
all
look,
of that, right? So
even if you analyze some of the games, right? There were a lot of South Africa beat England.
they were the only
bowling.
team.
Right, they did it, right?
Yeah,
Pakistan almost did it again.
Almost
And
did
honestly should have done it.
Yeah,
right? There was some really poor bowling and fielding in the back end, right? But whatever, they lost. But if you had to ask me, they should have done it. They had enough runs on the board, right? And even the final, I mean, it was, it could go either way at one point, right? So my point is that it was possible, and it wasn't a death sentence to be bowling, right? Second, so just you gotta, to the teams, suck it up, find a way, right?
Absolutely,
champion mentality. That's all it is.
Yep.
But moving on, let's talk about Pakistan because that's the story, right? This tournament legitimately, after the 2017 Champions Trophy, has given me so much joy, right? It was a pleasure to watch Pakistan.
Yep.
So let's go. What did Pakistan do well, right?
Yeah.
I'll kick it off. Just the one major thing was, and I said this to just me sitting there. I was blown away by how professional this team was.
Yeah.
Professional and Pakistan does not go hand in hand in any aspect of Pakistan. There's no professionalism in Pakistan apart from maybe corruption. We have professional corruption in place, but we do not have anything professional in anything else, right? But this was legitimately, we were probably the most professional team in that tournament.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And,
we executed everything to perfect. Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just going to throw it in. The only thing that's consistent about Pakistani cricket historically is that we're inconsistent.
Right.
And that showed the professionalism that you referred to showed in the level of consistency of our players and their performances. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, what was great was everyone knew their role. From Babar all the way down to Shaheen and Haris Rauf, everyone had a role and they played it perfectly. And, there was a plan. You could see that the coaching staff, Vernon Philander, Matthew Hayden, Suckling, they all said, this is what you need to do. And we went out and did it. It was blueprint. You knew what Pakistan was going to do. Look, they're going to, go bat, right? Babar and Rizwan are going to bat 10, 12 overs. Then in the back end, Asif Ali, Muhammad Hafiz, and Malik are going to have free license. And then the bowlers, Shaheen is going to look for swing. Haris Rauf is going to look for wickets and pace. Imad's going to look to contain. So there was a blueprint, and Pakistan executed it to perfection, right? It was just a pleasure to see. And, that's one thing that, I will give them credit for. Now, in the last 3 to 4 overs, that sort of professionalism went away, right? And then ultimately it cost us the game because you had to be near perfect to win this World Cup.
Yeah.
And just we lost in the last 3-4 overs and the fielding and whatnot. But I have to give kudos to the team. Everyone except for except for one person on the team who we will get to later. But I thought they did really well. What did you think of Babar's captaincy?
Oh man, I thought the leadership was excellent from Babar. I mean, he really united the team. You saw a lot of dressing room videos taken where he was kind of rallying the troops, whether win or
Great
loss.
Videos.
It was excellent leadership skills there. Kudos to him. And to be honest with you, I don't know where Pakistan became this professional team, but I feel it has to do with Babar's leadership and how he's kind of carried the team. I want to say a lot of it was, or I don't know, it's probably not fair for me to say a lot of it was due to some sort of a need for revenge from India or New Zealand for deciding to come and then not play in England.
Right.
Subsequently also pulling out. There's probably a lot of anger there because they have been an unfortunate cricketing nation, right? They've had to play for a decade outside of their country in the UAE for like the longest time, and that's a lot of kind of fuel that they had to put to the fire, and so they did exceptionally well. But let me speak a little bit more about some of the details, right? I mean, starting off with the opening partnership. I mean, Babar and Rizwan, I don't think I've seen a solid Pakistani opening partnership as good as that since Saeed Anwar and Amir Sohail.
Rizwan's a weird guy because if you look at his technique is not great.
No.
Right? He walks like he plays the walk defensive shot, right? He's a busy player, right?
He's an extremely busy player.
He's like a cross between Moin Khan and Salim Malik when I watch him play, right? Busy on the pitch, unorthodox shots, just like makes things look easy, but can also make them look extremely difficult because he's always just so busy, right? So how he became an opener and how he's managed to bat so well,
right?
You know, it's unbelievable. But he's
and
found a way
consistently with the averages he has. I mean, I think I would say this is the modern T20, right?
Yeah.
I don't see him opening in test matches.
No, that's never gonna happen.
And that's again because of those reasons that you mentioned, right? Because you need for test cricket, you need those.
You need those skill sets, right? You know, you're not gonna get right. But Babar and Rizwan were like the cornerstone of our batting, right? The pillars of our batting.
Rotation of strike was the other item. I think
they were fit,
extremely fit. Yeah. Fielding, like I said, until the drop catch against Australia, there were 0 drop catches.
We were phenomenal in the field.
They were phenomenal in the field. Rotation of strike was one of the best I've seen in any of the countries that were playing in the tournament. Yeah. Early wickets bowling, I think Shaheen doesn't get enough credit when you look at the stats, and we'll talk about that later. But he didn't have as many wickets as some of the other Pakistani players, but man, he set the stage for the rest. He's in the tournament, right?
Yeah, he's gonna be like, I'm making a big call right now. I mean, not a big call. It's not a big call now, but because he's proven himself. But too many people said Muhammad Amir was the next Wasim Akram. I actually never saw that. Shaheen though, he's got it. In swing, outswing, pace, brain, aggression, likable guy, right? Shaheen was terrific.
The other thing I'd also want to point out is you mentioned how with consistency, and you kind of likened Pakistan this tournament to Australia, I think one of the key results that we saw from that was how many match winners we had and man of the matches we had in the 6 games or the 5 games that we actually won. Each one was a different player, and that again speaks to how each person had a role and they perfected it and they played that role. And the finishing, I mean, I think we've been looking for a big hitter for a long time, and Asif Ali had that role of Shahid Afridi, right? And he knocked it 2 out of 3 times, which is pretty good for a role like that.
Yeah,
right?
I don't want to be a downer, right? But he did it, right? Yeah. No doubt Asif Ali stepped up in a huge way. I just don't know if he's going to continue doing that, especially in pitches where they're not as flat in Dubai, right? Yeah. Let's see how he does in other pitches. But your overall point is everyone had a role and they executed it perfectly.
With Asif Ali, I mean, you could argue in Australia coming up with those bouncy pitches because he likes to come on his front foot and smack it, right? It could be difficult, but there was a little bit of glimpse where there was a short ball that Asif Ali smacked and flat batted it straight down the ground, right? And it just kind of reminded me of that gully cricket mentality, right?
Right. And you
gotta hit straight. You hit to the right, you hit to the left. He could have pulled or cut, but he hit to the right or left, and you're gonna hit a window. So gotta hit straight. And I don't know how well that will go for him in Australia with those bouncy pitches, but I mean, he's just got to practice, keep hitting, and he's got to stick to that role.
Yeah, no, definitely. We'll see. I'm lukewarm on Asif Ali. I just see players being able to work him out, right? Don't pitch it up to him, right? But we'll see. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I was proven wrong about a lot of Pakistan cricket in the last 6 months or so, but let's see. let's Pakistan did a lot of good things, but they also got a few things wrong, right? And actually, before I go into that, did you read Matthew Hayden's report?
I actually didn't know.
Okay, so in that report, he there was a lot of praise, but the one thing that stood out for me, he said that players were nervous before. There was a lot of jitters before the Australian game.
Oh.
Yeah. And
even though they broke the hex against India, they didn't think they could do it against Australia.
Semi-finals.
There's always Pakistan versus Australia is always.
I feel like there's a lot of as much as people say there's a lot of a curse against India. Australia always beats us in these tournaments too, right?
Yeah.
And Matthew Hayden pointed, it's a semi-final. It's against a team that historically has pounded you, right?
Right.
So that was interesting to me. Now. And a lot of in that game, maybe there were moments where you could say, "Hey, there's a lot of nerves," and right. But I thought overall they played as well as they can, except for those last three. And maybe Hasan Ali dropped that catch because of his nervousness and the jitters, the pressure, or whatever it is, right?
Or maybe all of those pressures came back because until that point, Pakistan was in commanding position throughout. Until that point, that's 35 overs, 37 overs.
Right.
So really to lose it all at the end.
but I feel like that's where the difference is, right? Australia are champion mentality because they can master that pressure, right? They can, get that energy or whatever it is, that nervous energy, and mold it into a winning, state of mind, right? I don't know if Pakistan is there yet. It's a very young team, right? This Pakistan team. I mean, there's a few old people, but for the most, there's a lot of young players inexperienced in that team, right? But I just thought that was really interesting from Matthew Hayden that someone who's been in final after final after final, like he saw that, hey, these guys are nervous, right?
Right.
And maybe that's something for Pakistan to work on. But in terms of other things that went wrong, I don't think there was anything. If there's something that had to be pointed out, what do you think that would have been?
I think I would point it out to, you mentioned it earlier, right? The conditions, and you've got to put up a big total because you're going to be bowling under due and defending a target. And they were 170 odd for 4 against that Australia game. Yeah. With 4 wickets down, I can't blame them if they don't hit 180 or 190, but when you have 4 wickets down, it tells me you didn't take enough risk.
Yeah.
And I think that was missing. You saw with Babar's strike rate, it was slightly short of his average throughout the tournament. Same thing with Rizwan and Fakhr. No, actually, Fakhr played excellently in that game. But it's one of those...
But Fakhr had a slow start.
He did have a slow start. He picked it up near the end. Yeah. Those slog sweeps really helped him out.
Yeah, it's his get out shot. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's one thing I would point out, that they probably didn't go hard enough. And if it didn't work out and it was still 170, maybe even 160, but they had 8 down or 9 down, I would have said they took enough risks because you got to use up those wickets, right? Especially you got all these other big hitters left in your squad. And then the last thing I would probably say, and this is arguable, right? The rotation of the players. Playing the same 11 for all 6 games.
Well, I mean, we can get into it. I mean, Hasan Ali is the elephant in the room, right?
Right.
And I know the players and Babar pointed out that we're not blaming anyone, right?
Right.
But we knew who he was talking about, right? Hasan Ali.
I don't know, man.
No. Shaheen bowled poorly, and you could put a lot of blame into him as well. But Hasan Ali takes that catch, we probably win that game, right? Yeah. And it's not just that one catch. He had let's just face it, a very ordinary tournament, right? So, in terms of rotation, do you think they should have rotated earlier? 100%. I think they should have rotated after the second game against New Zealand. And just seeing for those last, 3 games, right. What can Mohammad Wasim Jr. or whoever else, right? Mohammad Nawaz, right? Can they bring something different to the table? I think they should have done that. And they certainly, but by the time it got to the semifinal, I was against it. At that point, you can't test anyone. Right. You have to play. But certainly those 3 games, that was a real opportunity to say, hey, can someone, I mean, if anything, they could not have done worse than Hasan Ali. But, again, who knows? If Hasan Ali came to Australia, Bolt got 3-4 wickets, nobody's saying anything, right? But I do think that you got to be near perfect in this World Cup, and we weren't perfect in that regard, and we had ample opportunity to fix it.
Right. So with regards to Hasan Ali, I'm a little different. I agree with you that he had an average tournament, but again, we talked about this, like, not every single person has to be a match winner as long as they can perform at least on average. And the other players, there are some other players that kind of perform above average. You should have a solid team. I mean, that's the problem with Pakistan historically, where they've had too many match winners that all fire at once, and then the rest of the decade they don't do anything. And this tournament, we saw that there's a lot of glimpses of players that are actually continuously going to do well, and they're very consistent players. With regards to Hasan Ali, yeah, he had an average performance, but he is a match winner in the end. He could have a good game. And to drop him after the second game, I mean, I was just looking at the squad right now. You had Mohammad Wasim. You didn't have a lot of bench strength, to be honest with you. When you look at the
you had a lot of inexperience there.
You had a lot,
and that's what I was saying. You don't play them in like an Australian game, but you play them in those three. Okay, let me put it to you this way: if Hasan Ali had been playing for Australia, do you think Australia would have kept picking him?
It's hard to say, man.
No, I don't think they do that, because that's the Champions. If you can't take any passengers, right?
But he hasn't been a passenger historically, right?
Historically, that's the past, right? The tournament is now, and you lose one game, you're out, right, in the semifinals. So I don't know. I mean, I can see this whole argument that he might deliver at some point, but that word might. That's just too much of a risk to take, and it cost us. Like, you could say Shaheen also bowled poorly, but Hasan Ali, in my mind, was a large part to blame for that. Right. And I hate saying that. I really do. You win as a team, lose as a team, but man.
my bottom line is that looking at the replacements, there's Sohaib Maqsood, there's Haider Ali, there's Mohammad Wasim, Sarfraz, and
Mohammad Nawaz.
Yeah. You had plenty of spinners, and none of the other spinners were doing poorly. So to bring in Mohammad Nawaz as well didn't make sense. Your only option truly was Mohammad Wasim, who has been uncapped, and it was like, well, maybe he's not uncapped, but it was going to be too easy for him to come in against Afghanistan, Scotland, Namibia, and that doesn't prove anything. Him performing well against those three teams doesn't necessarily say that he would have performed well against Australia. And in Hasan Ali's defense, a winning combination is a winning combination. Why change something that's winning, right?
Right.
And won for 5 straight games.
Yeah, look, I'm willing
to. It was average performance, not like below average performance. Like if it was below average performance, like get the guy out. But
yeah, look, who am I to question Babar Azam, right? But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it could have been very different, but again, hindsight's a wonderful thing. We'll move on from there. Let's not beat a dead horse. Yeah. So, why don't we do some player ratings?
Sure. Starting at the top?
Yeah, let's do that. I mean, there's only 11 players that played, right? So we know exactly what the thing is. Let's start with Babar and Rizwan.
For me, they were both 10. I mean, leading run scorers for the most part of the tournament. High strike rates, good averages, 61, 70. I think these guys were phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I'm not going to argue too much. I personally would give them 9s. I think they could have played faster in that semifinal, right? But again, it's just so small. I mean, they could have. Who knows? They would have got out earlier, right?
Yeah, who knows?
So I wouldn't say it was perfect. 10 is perfect. If they had won the thing, maybe I would have given them a 10. But 9, still great players. I love Rizwan. I love Babar. So not much. I'm not going to argue with you if you give you a 10. I'm perfectly okay with that. But number 3, Fakhar.
I think he had one good knock against Australia. There was another knock as well. I don't remember which team it was, but good strike rate, decent, especially against Australia where Babar and Rizwan were finding it difficult, hit 50-odd runs. I think that get out of jail, like we mentioned, slog sweep really helped him out, get him back in the groove. I don't know how often that's going to work, but yeah, he played well. I think his role was not as needed because Babar and Rizwan were doing so well. I think that I truly believe that. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, but
yeah, I think he was what he needed to do. He did.
Yeah.
Right. The only thing was, again, in that semifinal, he could have maybe picked it up a little bit fast, just like Babar and Rizwan. But you know what? He got there in the end, right? And I thought 174 or 170, whatever he scored, was more than enough runs. So I'm okay, but I think I'd give him a score of 7.
Yeah.
7 is fine. Who bats at 4? Hafiz. Man, this guy divides opinion so much. I can't remember anything significant that he did in the tournament.
No, again, he wasn't called upon much, but if you look at his stats, I mean, average of 28, strike rate of 163, 85 runs.
Yeah, he just did what he needed to do, right?
Yeah, and I, from my standpoint, I think he's a very clean hitter. I don't know if golf is the reason for that, but since he's done that, he seems to have really been able to hit, especially the spinners, down the ground a lot more comfortably than I remember a lot of other players in the past. And
yeah, Hafiz is what I say is a guy who's figured out the game. It's taken him 41 years to get there, but he has figured out what he needs to do in certain situations, what his strengths are, what his weaknesses are. He times everything. He knows what his timing is. But in terms of tournament, I don't know, 6?
Yeah, I gave him a 7. I mean, I consider 6 an average, but that's just my rating scale.
Yeah, I mean, it's splitting hairs. Malik.
Again, he did the role just like Hafiz. Extremely clean hitting. Had a strike rate of 182, average of 50. Again, he didn't. That average probably is misleading quite a bit because he really didn't play much of a part. But that 50 of 18 balls, granted it was against Scotland, but man, this guy still has it. Again, extremely clean hitting.
Yeah,
50 of 18 balls.
Yeah, no, that I was genuinely happy that he was in the team because these are the conditions he thrives on.
Right.
And he was very useful to have. He patted Hasan when he dropped that catch.
Yeah.
Right. He's a good figure to have. He's a professional guy he's one of the few players who looks after himself. Fitness is a big thing with this guy.
Yeah.
He's married to a tennis player, so that she probably rubs off on him.
Yeah.
But yeah, 8. I would say.
Yeah, I gave him 7, but yeah.
Okay, I give him higher than you. Okay, no, I those 2 knocks were phenomenal. Really good innings. So then that brings us to number 6, Asif Ali. Man, I don't know, like 8.
I gave him a 7, man. I above average. I think he played his role, but man, those 2 games was Afghanistan and New Zealand, and he essentially finished the game off and won it for us, man, in a lot of ways. Strike rate of 238, and like I mentioned, I think those were 2 of his good knocks against 3 times that he went out and batted, and so I think the 3rd time was against Australia, getting out on the first ball probably. I think.
Yeah, just like Hafiz, I think he played his role. He played his role right. He did what was required of him. So the next one is interesting. Shadab, who was my pick of the bowlers, had a phenomenal tournament.
Yeah,
this guy will be very, very good going forward. Played. Did he get 4 or 5 wickets in the final?
4.
4, right?
Semi-final,
yeah, in the semifinal. Sorry, 9 for me.
I gave him an 8, and you'll kind of see it's definitely higher than the 7s that you saw earlier, but gave him an 8, and my main reason is because, granted, he got 9 wickets, excellent economy rate, but the fact of the matter is that he doesn't open the bowling, right? He's not. He's coming in when the field's out, and that's not to take credit away from him.
Yeah.
8 is really good, but you'll see when I talk about Shane Shah Afridi, I gave him a 9, and the main driver is because he's under the gun, right? He's facing the difficult bowlers, and in a lot of ways, Shaheen Shah Afridi did a lot of the work, got the difficult batsmen out before he came in, and again, not taking credit away from Shadab. He did excellently.
I'm a big fan of Shadab. I like how he approaches the game. I think, and he's picked up his batting too.
Yeah, he has. Right? He's been working on it.
So I hope that if Ramiz Raja, you're listening to this, or Saklin, or whoever, please groom this guy. He has a lot of potential. And then the other all-rounder, Imad Wasim.
Yeah.
I think he did his job, right?
He did his job just like the others, right? 7 for me. Yeah,
just one thing, quick thing. It was a mistake, I think, to let him bowl to Warner in that semifinal. Warner's always had the better of Imad. I think Babar missed a trick there, but regardless, it wasn't a disaster. But those are the small things. As a captain, as a team, you should know that hey, this guy likes bowling against Imad. And he did do quite well. I mean, it wasn't a disaster, but it was almost like a free over for Warner.
Yep.
But anyways, Imad 7.
Yeah, I gave him a 7, man. Again, he had the best economy rate, 5.7. A lot of wickets, 4 wickets. Did his job. I mean, it's not easy to come in power play in the first couple of overs. You're facing Warner, Finch, Guttill, Rohit, Sharma, and then KL Rahul. These guys are all phenomenal batters.
Yeah, he did his job. He did. Okay, so next one I'm not going to go too much into. I'm just going to say I think 5 is what I'm going to give Hasan Ali. I know you're being a little bit more than that. I think, you're going to give him a 6?
I'm giving a 6, average for me.
Yeah.
But, 9 economy rate, 5 wickets for those that are interested. That is average performance, but let's not.
Let's not. I mean, 5. Yeah, 5 or 6, whatever. Right. At the end of the day, we know what happened. Okay. Shaheen Shah Afridi. Look, this guy's gonna be a superstar. He bowled like a superstar. Phenomenal, just phenomenal swing. Like, it's a pleasure to watch this guy bowl. He's just amazing to he's like Wasim in his prime, and I genuinely mean that. I hate it when people say the new this, new that, new Tendulkar, new Kohli. Like it's stupid. But this guy, there are so many similarities. So for me it was a 9. Yeah. Those last 3 overs really let him down, or the last over in his case really let him down.
Right.
I think he lost his head a little bit, but he's young. He's gonna learn. 9 though.
Yeah, I went with 9 as well, and again 7 wickets, economy rate of 7 as well. Opening the bowling at the death, and that's why. Granted, Shadab got more wickets than him. I gave Shadab an 8 and 9 to him because, in a lot of ways, Shaheen Shah Afridi had taken care of the dangerous batsman at the top, which is basically T20, right? You get the danger batsman out, and you really put everybody else on the back foot in the middle overs when the field is out.
Right.
So that's why I gave him 9. Last up is Rauf.
Steady. I think that's what Steady Eddie Harris Rauf. He got plenty of wickets. He got 8 wickets. Did he got more than Shaheen?
He got 1 more wicket than Shaheen and a little more expensive, 7.3 economy rate, but I gave him an 8, similar to Shadab, actually. Bowled in the same type of environment.
8 seems fair. The one thing I would say with Rauf, he's got to learn how to pick up more wicket-taking deliveries. And it's weird to say, but because he did pick up 8 wickets, he got more than Shaheen. But I always feel with him, he's relying on batsmen to make mistakes rather than him just bowling a beautiful delivery, getting the edge of the bat or something like that, right? He's relying too much on batsmen being surprised by the pace or the bounce or whatever, which is fine. That's one way of going about it. But to be successful in the long run, you got to bowl. You gotta have more in your arsenal, and I think he's missing that variety a little bit, which may take him to the next level. But 8 for me. What would you give Pakistan as a team?
Oh man, this team reminds me so much of how Kohli, the Kohli era started. This Babar, I feel like this is the Babar era, and I know you said you don't want anybody to compare to Kohli or anybody like that, but man, Babar's been doing phenomenally well, knock on wood, mashallah. I mean, I really hope this guy continues doing it, but I'm going to rate Pakistan as a 9.
That sounds fair.
Less, and I know that's higher than the average of the players that I gave, but as a team, and that goes back again to what we've been saying all along, right, is they really played as a team. You didn't need individual performances really to do it. They all carried their weight, including Hasan Ali.
Professionalism, great team ethic, team ethos, led by the front from Babar. This is a new team. This is a new Pakistan, Naya Pakistan in cricket, right? I think there's a lot of players in there, no ego. You look at Mohammad Rizwan, the way he battled. What do you have
I don't know. He had a flu or something.
He had a flu or something like that, right? Was on the hospital for 2-3 days.
Yeah.
Came back, played like a champion, phenomenal innings. Then you have other players like Babar Azam, just classy all along the way, right? Shaheen, who's going to be a top, I personally think top 5 Pakistan bowler of all time. You have other players like Malik, Hafiz guiding these young guys. Yeah. You have Shadab, who, leads from the front with his bowling, with his fielding. So there's a lot of good players in this team. And I think, it's just a matter of now, can they take the next step? That's always been the feelings of Pakistan. It's like they go for that high, and then it's like, like a failure. Like, remember 99 World Cup? Okay, you reached the final, lost. 2003 World Cup, disaster. 2007 World Cup, disaster. 2011, get to the semifinals. 2015, disaster, right? Win the Champions Trophy 2017, disaster. World Cup 2019, right? So it's really like, can you sustain this? Can you build a team that's not just going to be around for 1-2 years? It's actually going to be, we're going to talk about that team, right? That team, era, right? We'll see.
A team that doesn't bank on net run rate calculations and who must lose and who must win.
Yeah, you do it on your own.
That, man.
You do it in your own accord, and I think there's a lot of good stuff being done behind the scenes. Started with Wasim Khan, Ramesh Raja now with the PSL broadcasting rights and building new stadiums and basically building a professional culture, right? Now I don't know how effective this is Ramesh Raja, or these are just grand ideas that he's but it seems to be a step in the right direction. Right? So we'll see. Any last thoughts?
No, I think that's it from me. Wrap it up.
All right. Well, guys, if you like this episode, please subscribe. We're going to have more episodes along the way. We're going to be talking about the Bangladesh and West Indies series that just got wrapped up. We're going to talk about the PSL draft. A lot of big things happening there. And we'll be doing this until Pakistan we die or Pakistan cricket dies. But if you enjoy this content, please subscribe. Please join our Instagram, our Twitter handles are in the description, and we'll see you soon.